Hi folks, so I talked about doing a video today, this was 2 days ago, consecutive days of videos, and one tomorrow as well. I think it's actually going to be two more. It's going to be today and then two more videos as I become more and more present to everything that is going on. And these videos will, for the most part, start with a brief chat about the virus and the transits currently, because it's hard to ignore them, but the real meat and the really interesting part of the video, as far as I'm concerned, comes after this. So I'll keep that top part brief. Just as yesterday, the most interesting part of the video and the most relevant and the most important part of the video had to do with paying attention to what was happening the week before April 4th and the week after, and talking about the eclipses changing signs and why this week and next week are important. Similarly, today it's Venus's retrograde in Gemini, which is going to be coming up in the middle of May to the end of June, that is really at the heart of this. But if that transit has an impact on transits that we think or we are watching that may have an impact on the escalation of the virus, then it makes sense to talk about that. So let's get that part of it. Let's get the stage setting over with quickly. As we've discussed, the transits that we are watching, and there's more information on this in the last couple of videos, and links to that will be put at the end of this video once I'm done processing it, suggest that there's a continued expansion of the so-called bad news. As I said yesterday, the hits keep coming, you know, the challenges keep coming, they keep becoming more public. Our awareness of the expansion of this pandemic are going to at least keep coming till April the 4th, if not until after the full moon. At the same time, this last new moon at the end of March, at least for me, promises glimmers of hope in terms of either tests coming up or some idea of what can be put in place to start to quell the pandemic. I'm not suggesting that I'm very careful about saying this, because what I don't want to do is become representative of any smoke and mirrors act that may be available on television around how something is going to come in and is going to make everything go away instantly or something along those lines, or even kind of a show and tell about, look at the tests we've got going, you know. That's not what this is about. This is about the fact that we do sit with the wound and the expansion continues till April the 4th, if not April the 8th or 10th. And it would not surprise me if the lockdown continues through the month of April, even into some part of May. And as I've mentioned, the new moon at the end of April starts to make room for some kind of epiphanic liberation of some sort, or realization, and we'll wait and see where that takes us. But it's likely or possible that the virus is with us till November. And we'll talk more about this, not in tomorrow's video, but in day after tomorrow's video. But this is, I do want to mention that the second, as we get more and more into the core of this particular video and how it affects us personally and also globally, the second thing that I want to mention is to not lose sight of the fact that there may be a shelter in place or a quarantine or a lockdown, or certainly a scaling back of commercial activities or activities as they were continuing in the first few months of this year. But astrologically, as far as I am concerned, it is a time of rapid forward movement. It may mean that we are sitting at home, but we would be losing sight of the fact that we are on some sort of an escalator going into some sort of a future, and right now it is nerve-wracking because we don't know what that will be like. We're going to be spending a lot of the summer months catching up to this future, and as I've explained and described, forward movement happens at certain times for a few weeks in a year, and then retrogrades happen that allow us to get either our minds or our value systems or our vitality or our luck, or, you know, or our faith, frankly, or our sense of discipline and productivity needs a certain amount of time to catch up with this acceleration that occurs at certain times of the year. The first time of this year was in January till the first week of February in 2020. The second part of it is now from the end of March to the beginning of May, so the month of April, and there will be another spurt of forward movement in August. But May June, and July are going to see us having to adjust to this acceleration of forward movement. The reason why this doesn't feel like forward movement is because things are moving forward, perhaps in directions and ways that are unexpected. But it is forward movement. There is a reality being created now that we will have to adjust to. And the best thing that I can say is that up to a point you can only grapple with and deal with, as you are on this escalator moving forward, whatever is in front of you and makes sense at the time. There's a lot that may come through that feels final that may not be final. Or we said we were doing this, we're not doing this anymore. Oh, this is canceled. You just don't know by the time you're in August what is canceled, what is not canceled, what we thought we were going to postpone. We're just all doing the best we can. At the same time, I do think it is important, if you want to rest, as I said, to rest, because once you actually allow your body and mind to rest, I find that the resting process is often swifter and more efficient, and you come back to things more productive and ready to go. If you keep fighting the resting and feel like you should be doing all these other things, then there's no rest and there's no productivity. And if you are in a space where you feel like you need to be productive and catch up on a backlog of tasks and kind of make hay as the sun, when the sun does not shine, as I've called some of my videos, then by all means do so, because in a certain, trust your compass with regard to what this is affording you to do based on your own situation. Not everyone is reacting to or dealing with this time in the same way. Some people are dealing with extraordinarily stressful circumstances, whether they have to do with illnesses or caretaking or being medical professionals or financial realities, and others are in a different place. So gauge where you're at, gauge what this time period is affording you, and act accordingly. And you may need to construct two realities, and I'm going to talk about this day after tomorrow. One in which things start to come back together by the time the summer months get rolling, and one in which by the time you get to August, one in which you had a certain set of plans that were moving forward a certain way, and now you've got to come up with a different set of plans. What if this, and this does not happen? Where am I putting my energy then? What is plan A and what is plan B? Plan A being things are moving forward between January and March in a certain direction, and some of the stuff may come up again, or I may go back to my old life again. Plan B is, if I don't get to go back to my old life as things start to open up, then what is my plan B? What am I going to do then? None of this calls for you to act and implement a plan in place until things start to open up, but it still involves either thought, reflection, or action if you have the time or the bandwidth, the energy to start to get your mind around it to some extent. Okay. The planet Venus that has been in Taurus for the last month or so, and I did a video on this called Greening, moves into Gemini on April the 3rd. Venus is a planet that I find that I, as an astrologer, am reclaiming from a patriarchal view, a male-centered view of her. When it comes to the Moon and Venus, often the projections on those two bodies are very male-oriented. The Moon is about our emotions and our intuition and hysteria, which is often a word that is associated exclusively with women. You rarely hear a man being called hysterical unless there's a femininity associated with that man. And with Venus, it's all about beauty and money and luxuries and the things that men covet. The real nature of Venus, I find, really has to do with a passive intelligence and a letting be growth, maternity to some extent. As I've described it, it's the force or the power that makes things grow and become abundant. The sign of Libra has a lot to do with balance and harmony. And I look at balance and harmony as the grass growing and the trees bearing fruit, and us being part of a Venusian abundance and splendor that belongs on this planet when things are in balance and things are in harmony. And excessively male forces of hunting and gathering don't interfere with that process to the point where that balance is lost. In Taurus, I find that that balance has a lot to do with us relating to our sense of abundance and what we value and what we need and the resources we need in order to be fruitful and productive and survive and thrive. One of the byproducts of these lockdowns and this Mercury retrograde period that we just went through is that with, for example, the absence of traffic on the road, or the wildlife starting to come into the cities as humans have retracted, or news reports, I don't know how substantiated they are, that the planet is starting to heal itself, or the ozone layer is starting to heal itself in certain parts of the planet. This is all very Venus and Taurus. I have the opening to create peace and balance and harmony. I am stepping in. Now, Venus, alas, moves into Gemini on April the 3rd. And while she isn't massively uncomfortable in Gemini, it's a different energy. Gemini is a much more communicative, social energy that is a lot about fitting in. Siblings, cousins, relatives, interactions, colleagues, chatter, gossip, information, data, communication, learning, skill acquisition, social media, technology, getting the word out, paying attention to the word on the street, feedback, listening to what is going on around you. All of these are very sort of Geminian, necessary, important, interviewing, sales, resumes. It's a sign that's often associated with a worldly wiseness, worldly wiseness is better, and a certain slickness perhaps when it becomes excessive. But it fundamentally has to take into account that we are not isolated beings. It's an interesting entry into Gemini at this point in time, and somewhere connection and fitting in becomes important and necessary. Venus's entry into Gemini is somewhat welcome because she may temper or try to enforce a certain amount of balance in the sign, but often with signs, they impact the planets more than the planets impact them. So our relating and with Venus, there's a natural flow to relationships and harmony and giving and taking, and there's a natural flow to money and abundance and luxuries and resources that Venus manages and governs. Wherever Venus goes, we look at Venus as a lucky and a fortunate planet for the most part that is coming in with good fortune. The good fortune comes from outside, and it is essentially, the word is opportunity. Relationship opportunities, financial opportunities. Opportunities perhaps for restoring a sense of balance and harmony. A social opportunity too. Now, wherever Gemini sits in your chart, it could be within reason, because if Gemini sits in the 12th house, then this is not necessarily going to be the case. So wherever Gemini sits in your chart, it could be that financial and relationship opportunities are brought to you. Now, Venus sits in a certain part of the chart for about a month, typically, a little over, a little under. It's moving pretty fast right now. But on May the 13th, it is going to go retrograde. So Venus is going to go into Gemini, almost cross through Gemini, but on May the 13th, go retrograde, and then almost go to the top of Gemini, and on June the 25th, go direct again. So Venus is in Gemini from April the 3rd to August the 7th. It's almost 4 months. That's a hell of a long time for Venus to be in one place and one side. And I frankly find the prospect of that exhausting and not a lot of fun. I like Venus moving through certain parts of the chart because I feel like opportunities then get to be scattered. Pay attention to where Gemini is in your chart, because there is activity related to luck, opportunities, but really relationships, finances, a sense of abundance, resources, a sense of self-worth and self-esteem, a knowing when to be active and passive, especially kind of allowing things to be in a certain place, harmony, creativity and the arts, all these Venusian things and the opportunities and some of the relationship issues may be with women, may have a feminine nature to them and a feminine quality to them, and the opportunities may come from women. So these are all things to pay attention to. To me, the heart of this conversation and this particular transit is its retrograde. When Venus goes retrograde, and this is what I want you to really pay attention to, when Venus goes retrograde, the majority of the planet experiences a financial tightness or a certain amount of scarcity. And fundamentally, Venus is doing this to ask you what you value. Often with abundance and Venus moving fast, things tend to overgrow or become big. And some of my clients who have had readings with me recently will have heard me say this. When we have the money, we pay for the dry cleaning and we pay for the Netflix subscription, the Hulu subscription, the Amazon Prime subscription. It's the best analogy I can find. And all this, the money comes in, the checks are coming in, the expenses are fine. I know at some point I want to deal with it, but everything is lush and green and it's going. And the fundamental question at some point has to be asked is, what do you own and what owns you? What do you value? Where are you trying to go? What are you trying to do? When you look at what you have, what gives you a sense of abundance, does it serve you or are you serving it? And once the finances start to get pulled back, you are forced to make choices and reevaluate. That is the word. Reevaluate. What do you value? What you own? And what your finances and relationships facilitate. From a relationship perspective, it's a similar question of pruning. What is supporting you and supporting harmony and ease in your life, and what is not? From a global perspective, this makes a lot of sense now, because, as I've mentioned before, there's a period of rapid forward movement and escalation that is happening. We are all on some sort of escalator or conveyor belt right now, heading towards somewhere. And it's likely that the middle of May to the end of June, doesn't it make sense that we globally are going to have to go, okay, now where are we at and what is our financial reality on a collective basis? We have a lockdown. Right now there are supplies. Is there going to be some sort of an impact on the supply chain? Because if there are communities that are only focusing on essential functions, is someone going to, who is farming? Is someone going to, are there going to be shortages we need to be mindful of? Does that become clear or apparent where that's going to be during this time frame? Do we need to reevaluate? This is not a video about going out and hoarding. This is not a video about selfishness. It is the very opposite of that on some level. But there are realities. Venus retrograde is a very real transit. Even if companies are laying off people and we start to see things open up, maybe in May or maybe in June, cautiously, let's say tests become available and we have a sense of who is positive, who's negative, who can go back to the workforce, who can't, who we're still dealing with, who's still grappling with, things start to become a little bit more functional. Although there are aspects of the lockdown for people who are not directly dealing with the illness as caretakers or as people who are afflicted by it, that really makes me wonder what is functional and what is not functional in Venusian terms. The sky is bluer than it has ever been. The clouds look higher than they ever have, etc., etc. But as things become more materially and economically functional, is everyone going to get hired back? What is our financial reality going to be? If you were dependent on some grants, if you were dependent on some work coming through, if you were an independent contractor and you were waiting on a contract that is now paused, if you were ready to take on a job and the offer has to be rescinded, what is our financial reality at that point as a result of this forward movement? Finances, relationships, and then things like luxuries and the arts and women and Venusian things. I'm going to keep this simple and I'm just thinking about what I want to expand on Venusian things, and I'm going to keep it to relationships and money for the sake of this video. So we are heading to a time. Now, Venus going direct between April the 3rd and the middle of May, especially in the month of April, Okay. Venus going direct after the end of June into August. Okay. There's flow in the first part of this, there's flow in the third part of this. There isn't flow in the second part of this, unless you have Venus retrograde in your birth chart. Might be really interesting to see what that retrograde period is like for you. So, reevaluating, a pruning, and understanding of financial and relationship realities. And the relationships are not just personal relationships, they could be professional relationships. Now it makes sense. Now this retrograde makes sense to me in the context of everything that is going on. And I think it's important for me to give you this heads up now so that you can get a sense of the fact that for those people who are feeling fine and abundant, the question is, it's not a question of flow stopping, although for some people it could be. It isn't a question of hoarding. It isn't a question of sitting on what you've got. Each of us has to take our own financial responsibilities for how we're dealing with and managing our finances. Each of us has, I'm finding when I talk to my clients that the responses to whatever it is that we're dealing with collectively are diverse. And some people may need to take care of certain things or the projects that they're taking. You know, our relationship with our money right now is an individual responsibility for each of us and each of you. And it's not a question of stopping financial flow, although that could be a reality when Venus goes retrograde for certain people. It is a question of reevaluating, but really, it is a question of understanding where you want to go and what you want to do and what you want to achieve and what you want your life to look like. And then to really look at the relationships and the financial flow and make decisions to prune the relationship and the financial tree so that it can come back with a more appropriate and healthier abundance, so that there isn't waste, so that what you own isn't owning you, so that the contracts that are in place, cell phones, blah, 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 aren't wasteful, so that your resources are and your relationships are supporting you and your goals and your truth, and that things haven't gotten to a point where things have gotten to a point where they need to be looked at, because that's typically what happens by the time Venus goes retrograde. Okay, feel free to share this video if you found it useful and helpful. This is why I started with the timeline of the COVID stuff in the beginning, because personally and globally, this Venus retrograde is starting to make a lot of sense. Mercury goes retrograde in July, and even that makes sense to me with regard to mentally having to process at that point in time decisions that need to be looked at again. As I said, forward movement in April, forward movement in August, financial and mental adjustments and communication adjustments and agreement adjustments, understanding adjustments in middle of May to the middle of July, at least. Okay? Makes sense. And as far as timelines are concerned and when this can lift and that can lift, I'm not a big fan of that kind of I really, we'll talk more about that 2 days from now. I think people who've been watching my videos already know that I have an ambivalent relationship with that, using the virus as a marketing opportunity to all of a sudden become predictive. I find that distasteful, but I will continue to, in the spirit of investigation and looking at where does the things might be going, we'll continue to talk about some of that in these videos. If you found this video useful, feel free to share it. If you would like to like the video or comment on it, if it feels natural, it gives the videos more circulation. Subscribe to my YouTube channel. Click on the bell icon next to the subscribe button to be notified when I do new videos. You would have to do that in YouTube, and my contact information is in the description area. So if you want to contact me to inquire about prices for readings, if you would like me to make an easy-to-read version of your birth chart that will tell you which signs are in which parts of the chart, you're welcome to do that, and reach out to me at that email address and I can get you information about that. You will need to know your birth time for that chart thing. All right, I'm going to leave it at this. We have 2 more videos planned, at least for now, one tomorrow and one day after, and we'll take it from there. Okay, thank you.